Episode 188, Grasslands and Attacks on Agroecology. This is the World Organic News for the week ending 30th September 2019. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Grasslands are a somewhat ignored sector of the environment. This is not surprising, especially in the English-speaking world. It is not until European colonisation that English speakers come into contact with such large areas of grassland. So the previous understanding of grazing country underpins our understandings of these niches. Not many individuals, and certainly no culture in the English-speaking world, had lived on a steppe. Smaller spaces, intensive grazing, enclosures and political structures around these environments underpinned the colonial experience. The indigenous colonised peoples had developed cultural systems to deal with large areas of grassland. These environments generally, and I know speaking generally is fraught with danger, but come with me, tend to be lower in rainfall, less reliable rainfall, and to suggest to a Western European eye, wheat fields. The peoples of the steppe, the great nomadic herders and scourges of settled peoples everywhere, the seemingly riverless expanses of grassland are remarkably fertile. The problem inherent in the previous ideas, wheat fields and nomadic herders, is the clash of civilizations. Now this clash isn't like our current culture wars, it goes back to the founding of settled living, agriculture and horticulture. While not of a religious bent myself, I do see this carefree mobile culture versus the hierarchical top-down settled peoples of the Middle East in the Cain and Abel story, and again in the Epic of Gilgamesh when Enkidu, the wild man who ran with the beasts of the fields, is seduced into the civilized world, in inverted commas, by a temple prostitute, as both these stories reveal the fears of the settled peoples to the wild ones. Mongols at the gates of Vienna, overrunning parts of the Caliphate and ruling the Chinese Empire for a period, all point to our misgivings about grasslands, and then the need to plant them to wheat or rye or whatever, and to fence these areas has blinded us to the very great potential for so many things. Carbon sinks, meat production and biodiversity hotspots, to name but a few. Colonists adapted, but the accumulated landscape knowledge of the indigenous populations was much reduced and completely lost in some cases, usually deliberately by the colonising culture. So to our first article this week, Teaming Up for Global Grasslands, from the Highlands News Sun. Quote, grasslands make up more than 40% of the world's ice-free land. Grasslands are important because they have sustained humanity and thousands of other species for centuries. But today these grasslands are shifting literally beneath our feet. Global changes, which include climate change, pollution and other widespread environmental alterations, are transforming the plant species growing in grasslands. End quote. And this is a point worth remembering. Grasslands are not monocultures. They're made up of many different species of grasses, herbs, forbs, and legumes. And the fact that they're not monoculture is part of the reason why so many of them have made such poor wheat fields, eventually. Good returns in the first few years, then a steady decline and eventually desertification in some places, as the environmental benefits of biodiversity and the soil carbon disappeared from the systems. We tamper with these things at our peril. Admittedly, during the colonial period, this sort of thing was not even thought of, let alone understood. But we don't fully understand it now, but we know enough to be a little bit more careful, perhaps. From the piece, again. Quote, changes in the plants that comprise grasslands could put these benefits at risk. Is it good rangeland for cattle, or is it good for storing carbon? Said lead author Dr. Kim Komatsu, a grassland ecologist at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Centre. It really matters what the identities of the individual grassland species are. You might have a really invaded weedy grassland that would not be as beneficial for the ecological services that humanity depends on. End quote. It's not surprising that we as a species have altered the makeup of grassland species. We've changed every ecosystem on the planet, so grasslands would be unusual if they missed out. The point is we can return them to different points of equilibrium that are more suited to environmental services, including food production and carbon capture. What we do on our own pieces of land can make a real difference. It does require thought before actions and an ability to modify those thoughts as the evidence becomes available. Now our second piece, which sort of relates to this, is from India. The attack on agroecology by the Shanghai Express, and it's a salutary warning for those trying anything new. Now, provided it doesn't threaten the status quo, it'll be ignored, but once the new idea starts to have an effect, changing paradigms, for instance, the empire will strike back, to borrow a phrase. From the article, quote, "Powerful lobbies with vested interests see agroecology as a threat to their influence on farming systems. Agroecology is recognised worldwide as a system that enhances fertile landscapes, increases yields, restores soil health and biodiversity, promotes climate change resilience, and improves farmers' well-being. Its practices are supported by many agricultural scientists, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, the IPCC from the UN, farmers' groups, and several NGOs. It is therefore surprising that the National Academy of Agricultural Sciences, this is an Indian body, based on a brainstorming session that included industry representatives, sent a letter to Prime Minister Narendra Modi opposing zero-budget natural farming, in brackets ZBNF, close brackets. ZBNF, developed and publicised by agro-scientist Subha Palika, has been adopted by Andhra Pradesh, so that's a state in India, end quote. We will be covering the zero-budget natural farming technique over at Regen Earth in the near future, and there's a link for that podcast in the show notes. We're between seasons at the moment, but if you subscribe, it'll just drop into your feed when we're back on board. Now, the key words to pay attention to in that quote are zero and budget. Agricultural companies, agronomists, universities will not make money if all farmers changed over to zero-budget farming. That it works is of no interest to, say, Bayer, suppliers of seed and, of course, the ever-popular glyphosate, as well as the rest of Monsanto's GMO crops. So if you save your seeds, make your own natural fertilisers, companion plant and so on, shareholders are not going to receive much value in inverted commas. Farmers will, and maybe that's not a bad thing, and I'd argue it is the point. Indeed, this is so, but it is put so much better in the article. Quote, "Threat to powerful elites, farming in India, as in most other countries, is largely under the control of powerful lobbies with vested interests and connections to deep pockets. These include fossil fuel, fertiliser and seed companies, as well as scientists with funding connections to agribusiness. These lobbies perceive large-scale transitions to agroecology as a substantial threat to their influence on farming systems," end quote. And probably their incomes as well, but we've just covered that. So as we make these changes in the world, get ready for the backlash. Stick to the science that works, improve your soil, and change the world. And I think we'll call that stumps for this week. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.